Hi, everybody, and welcome to day 3 of the virtual Rocket Boys Festival. And thanks to the thousands of folks that have been watching live from all over the country, all over the world. And for the folks that are watching on a delayed basis, these links will remain posted on YouTube. And we've got folks who are chiming in on YouTube and Facebook Live today. If you have a question or a comment for any of our presenters in any of the sessions, just type them in on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll be happy to pose those questions. Our first session today is about Southern West Virginia and the Appalachian heritage of places like Coalwood. And to get the conversation started, we're going to reach out, first of all, to one of the original Rocket Boys and see if he's there. Roy Lee Cook, are you with us?
I am here.
Also, a gentleman who was so touched by the Rocket Boys story, although he is from Minnesota, he did an entire documentary about the town of Coalwood and brought busloads of students all the way from the Minneapolis area to the Rocket Boys Festival for many years. Steve Date, are you there in Minnesota?
Hello, hello.
Hey, thank you for being here. Also, the executive director of the Rocket Boys Festival and also Theater West Virginia, Scott Hill, joins us from Beckley, West Virginia. Hey, Scott, are you there?
Good morning, gentlemen. How are y'all today?
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. So I want to start, Roy Lee, with you as a Coalwoodian. Can you tell me what made that town special in your eyes before the rest of the world discovered it because of Homer Hickam's book, Rocket Boys and the movie October Sky? What is it about Coalwood?
Thank you. First of all, the person that founded Coalwood, Mr. Carter, and later on, Mr. Laird, who was the general superintendent of the mine, decided to make Coalwood a model coal mining community. So therefore, we had paved streets, paved sidewalks. We had our own bakery, our own theater, our own newspaper. We had schools, churches, and it was just a wonderful place to live. We were just a place unto ourselves.
And it really is a place unto itself. You know, several years ago, and we'll talk more about the city of Beckley, the Rocket Boys Festival was moved to the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine, which is this incredible reproduction of a mining town from the early 20th century. It's sort of, I say, the Disney version of Coalwood, but Coalwood in and of itself is very remote and hard to get to. Do you think that's why the town's founders tried to make it, Roy Lee, sort of insular and self-sufficient?
I think so. We had our own carpenters and our own plumbers and folks that took care of the infrastructure, if you please. And we probably could have been totally self-sufficient. Obviously, we couldn't raise the food we needed and things like that, but they were brought in. We had a company store that literally sold everything from appliances, furniture, down to the necessities of food and water and that sort of thing. So it was very nice. As you see on the screen, the clubhouse there is an example. We had parties at the clubhouse. We had people from out of town that would come there and stay, and it was always a place for the executives of the outside companies that would come in. It was a wonderful place to have, and right across the street from it was the company store, and sort of catty-corner to it was the company church. I don't know who decided what religion we had to be, but in my case, it was sort of unusual anyway to have a company church.
Yeah, Homer has said in presentations before that it was a low bid religion, whichever minister they could get in at the lowest price. Steve Date, you, as we mentioned at the top of the presentation, you were so touched by this town, you did a documentary about Coalwood. You're from far, far away from Southern West Virginia. So from your vantage point, what made Coalwood so special that you devoted hundreds of hours to making a movie to document that tiny town in Southern West Virginia?
Well, I'll tell you that I didn't have that idea before I went there the first time. I went with a group of teachers. It's kind of a long story, but in a nutshell, it was a professional development experience for us because the leader of our group, Julie Blue, knew Homer from Space Camp in Alabama. She was the education director there. So she thought this would be a great idea to bring us down there. and experience a story that is definitely about education and about teaching, the Rocket Boys story. And so we went, and it was part of a two-part experience called Colwood to the Cape. So then the following February, we went to Cape Canaveral. But when I got there, I just thought, this is really great. Being with teachers, learning, and we were learning not by reading or by taking classes, but we were learning by going somewhere and experiencing a different lifestyle, different culture, different types of people that we never would probably have come across otherwise. A lot of people drive through West Virginia on the way to the East Coast, but they don't go to places like Colwood. So it was unique. And then because Julie had a connection with Homer, we were able to meet some of the characters, most of whom were elderly at that time and are now gone, like Red Carroll and Bill Bolt and some of those people. And that led to me thinking, this is really interesting. This is really cool. I think I'm going to make a film about this town. And I was not a filmmaker. I did not have a camera, and I just started from there. And so that's an education experience in its own, what I went through learning how to do this.
If you've seen the movie October Sky, it was actually filmed in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, because the town of Colwood had changed so much since the 1950s when the story was filmed. If you want to see what the real Colwood was like, we encourage you to pick up the Welcome to Colwood documentary that Steve did. And again, that's one of the reasons why the October Sky Festival and Rocket Boys Festival was moved to Beckley in later years. The residents were few and far between. Before we move away from this slide, though, Roy Lee, can you sort of walk our viewers through what they see on the screen? And let's start in the upper left there with the group of miners.
Yes. Every year, they would choose several boys in the 8th or 9th grade to go inside the mine and visit, sort of like a field trip. It was a very interesting thing. At the bottom of the 600 feet was a complete machine shop that built things. It was like going down in the ground into a major city. However, the dark side of that was, we want you young guys to know this is what you're going to do the rest of your life. You're going to go in the mine and work. That's not a bad thing. It's not a great thing, but it was a thing. On to the right was a group of houses going down the substation area where Hickam and I lived in our early years. That must have been very early itself, someplace maybe 1920, 1918, because we always had streets and sidewalks there built. Over to the right is a picture that shows I think Miss Riley's homeroom with a picture of the poster from October Sky. I believe that's what that is. And then down below it is another picture that I believe is from Miss Riley's high school class. Miss Riley taught us both chemistry and physics. It was a brilliant teacher, and only about 3 years older than we were. And then you see the clubhouse I mentioned a while ago. It's gone now, and I'm very saddened to that because it was such a wonderful structure. Hickam and I looked into seeing what it would take to refurbish it. We were given numbers upwards of $1 million to refurbish it. I think those were outlandish numbers, but nevertheless, the person that owns that coal mine to this day, that property, would not have let us do it anyway. And then further to the left is the front of a building that was part of the offices as well as the company store. And as I said before, you could buy Christmas trees there, you could buy all your food there, you could buy furniture there. And in a way, you could buy it on credit because you could only spend the script, the currency of the coal company that was generated to buy things. And as an example, if you went into the store, say on Monday, and you didn't have any script left, they would still sell you goods, but then it would come out of the wage earners' pay, and but they would get what was left over in script, not real cash. And then the picture right above it shows a real nice view of what I call downtown Coalwood, which is two of these items are already gone. The building on the left, which was the company store, and the building on the right, which was the clubhouse. And then all you see is the company church, which is, by the way, a Methodist church and has been for about 50 years. I guess they were the low bidder.
This is the virtual Rocket Boys Festival, and there's so much happening with the festival, and so many books have been written about Coalwood now, some by Homer, some by others who are touched by that magical town. Many people think of Rocket Boys as the book about Coalwood. It's actually part of a trilogy of books that he did, including Sky of Stone, about when Homer came back from college and worked underground in the mines. In that previous slide, though, everything is gone with the exception of the church now. None of those buildings, I don't believe, are still standing, including Big Creek High School. I want to bring Scott Hill into the conversation now, the executive director of the Rocket Boys Festival and also Theater West Virginia. You know, as a fellow West Virginia native, Scott, you know, we've all been touched by this story, but you more so than most, and you were instrumental in making sure that the story of the Rocket Boys stayed alive when the town of Coalwood could no longer take care of the festival. So tell me about that, the migration of the festival from Coalwood to Beckley.
Well, we understood that the folks in Coalwood were retiring from the festival business. Didn't know reason why, but now I know it's a lot of work. And they were decided to not have this particular festival again. And we thought, myself and some others thought that Beckley would be a good place to do this because in short, West Virginia doesn't have that many great stories. This is a great story. And so we're going to preserve this as long as we can, as was our theme. We contacted Homer, he contacted Roy Lee and the other Rocket Boys, and they decided to come and be a part of it. The mayor of Beckley said, hey, I've got a place for you, the exhibition coal mine. It's got a coal mine that you can actually go in. It's got a company store. It's got this, it's got that. It's got a place to shoot off rockets. I mean, it's designed. If Disney was making Coalwood, this is what it'd be like. And so for the last 8 years, the city of Beckley has hosted the Rocket Boys Festival, and it's been my upside for me. I was made the acquaintance of Roy Lee Cook and the Rocket Boys and Homer, and it's been a very positive thing. There's just not enough good West Virginia stories around, and this is a great West Virginia story. Growing up in West Virginia, even we were taught kind of the downside of the company town. There was never a good company town. It was always a bad company town. They took advantage of the folks. And this book and these folks are standing proof that, you know, some company towns were done right and took care of their things. I think, Roy Lee, you guys even had a pool. Is that correct?
We did. I left that out. We had a tennis court and a pool. And at the tennis court, we had some real stars in the tennis world that, had things been different in the world, they could have probably been world champions. Gylinda Cox comes to mind first because she was just an outstanding female tennis player. In that swimming pool, of course, I'll skip over it. We were actually taught to swim over in Welch before we got our pool. 2 days a week, Mr. Likens, the school principal, would take the boys to the pool, and 2 days a week, the girls. And there he would teach us how to swim. Now, Hickam is a great example of a good swimmer. We all know his history of training the astronauts and all sort of things. For myself, not so good. But the one thing I can do, I have a pool at home in West Virginia. If I need to go to the side of the pool to get my drink, I probably could do that. Outside of that, I don't know.
You know, you're right. Homer does, it did for many years in NASA, work in that underwater buoyancy simulator, training astronauts for weightlessness. And it all started at that Coalwood community pool. And we should mention, if you're ever traveling through the mid-Atlantic or the East Coast, many people come to West Virginia and they want to see the town of Coalwood. And we certainly encourage that. Colwood is very remote. It is literally at the end of a road. You never pass through Colwood. It's very difficult to get to. So we always recommend to folks that they stage in the city of Beckley. Beckley as a confluence of two interstate highways. There's an airport there. There's an Amtrak station, lots of hotels, lots of restaurants. None of those things exist in Colwood, sadly, anymore. So plan to camp in Beckley and then head on over for a day trip to Colwood. And we're going to show some photos of what the Rocket Boys Festival looked like in Beckley. The 20th and final Rocket Boys Festival was last year. It was a huge success. We also are encouraging folks who are watching live to send us their questions, their comments on Facebook Live and YouTube, and we'll pose them to our panelists today. First question is from Kirk, and Kirk wants to know, how did a community like Colwood attract such an excellent teacher like Miss Riley? And we'll pose that to you, Roy Lee. You grew up there. Was education important back then, even though it was a community town and most of the boys were expected to go into the mines? It seems like you had some fantastic teachers. So how did a community like Colwood get somebody like Miss Riley to teach there?
Well, first of all, a statistic that in 1960, the year that we graduated from high school, we had a higher percentage of college-bound students than the national average in America. And that says something for the entire region. In Colwood, we had fine teachers that always encouraged all the students to not stop with a high school education, but to continue on to college. Even if we didn't know how we were going to do it, we did it. Yes, education was probably the foremost thing on everybody's mind, of the parents. If you take away from that, a little bit of religion and a lot of union.
I love it. Here's a question, and we'll pose this one to Steve Date. This is from Lucy, who wants to know where they can see the Colwood documentary. So the documentary that you did about Colwood.
Yeah. Hi, Lucy. I have a website. I don't have it streaming right now, but I have DVDs available. My website is stevedate.com, STEV.DATE.com, and I do sell DVDs there. I'm thinking about possibly putting it on streaming at some point, but I haven't done that. To be honest, the interest, as you might imagine, was very high back in the early, let's say, late 2000s when it first came out, and then it diminishes a little bit every year, and I think it's still going to go strong for quite a while, but right now it's just DVD. They do also show it on PBS. I understand, you can correct me if I'm wrong, anybody there, but they show it on PBS West Virginia during their pledge drive periods. At least they did a couple of years ago.
And, you can see the trailer to Steve's excellent documentary it's available on YouTube. And there's also a great, if you want to find out more about the behind the scenes of Colwood, there's a great little short documentary that was on as a special bonus feature on many of the October Sky DVDs, where they interviewed the real Principal Turner and some other Colwoodians. So a couple of good places to get some background on Colwood in that area. Here's a message that came in from a Facebook Live viewer, from Katie. She wants to know how she can get in touch with Homer Hickam. She's applying for an internship at NASA this summer, wants to ask him questions about NASA. That's a great question. And that's one of the reasons, Scott, why I think it's so important to keep the Rocket Boys story alive, because it's so inspiring to young people everywhere. We talked about in one of the sessions yesterday how a young Elon Musk met Homer at Space Camp in Huntsville, and he's done pretty well for himself. So Kate, I want to answer your question directly. You can reach out to Homer at homerhickam.com. That's homerhickam.com. And also, if you'd like to pick up one of Homer's books about Colwood or space, they're all available there. And Homer's wife Linda runs an online bookstore that allows you to pick up copies of those books autographed by Homer himself. So that's the best way to reach out to Homer. And he is very, very responsive to his readers and fans all over the country, all over the world. Scott, I'd like for you to walk us through some of the photos that we see here from the Rocket Boys Festival happening there in Beckley. Starting in the upper left, there you are with Roy Lee and Homer.
That's exactly right. The men who would bail me out and the one who would get me in jail. You take your pick. I always carried Homer's phone number in my wallet during the Rocket Boys Festival because Roy Lee was in town. But and then there's Roy Lee expecting a rocket under beneath there, and then we got Homer kneeling. Now I believe that's in Coalwood because of the white pillars. I don't think we have that. I think that's an early shot of Homer, and then the guys. There's Jimmy Carroll and Billy and Roy Lee and Homer there. In the middle, we have the folks in camo there, and that's down in Coalwood for sure. And Steve, I believe that's your all's gang right there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was the first year that I went, which was 05, and I got the T-shirt or the sweatshirt.
All right. Very good. Very good. And then this is our church, one of the buildings that the Beckley city of Beckley has. It's an old company church, and we hold our writers workshop, and we also hold our essay contest right there in the church. So that's what it looks like in the little church at Beckley. There is Roy Lee up in the top corner, being Roy Lee, and then there's Roy Lee, the guys, and then there's a Miss Riley Rocket there in the bottom, I believe. So I tell you what, it was people would call and say, okay, how much does it cost to get Homer Hickham's autograph or the Rocket Boys autograph? And I go, nothing. And they said, what do you mean nothing? I go, well, what's nothing? And I said, we're here to tell a story. And you mean I could meet the Rocket Boys and I don't have to buy anything and there's not a ticket? And I go, yeah, that's right. And, go home and tell your friends. And it's almost got to the point where we were offering at the festival such an experience that people really didn't believe it until they came in and experienced it. And you could meet Homer, and that's one level. You can meet Roy Lee Cook, and that's a whole different thing. Roy Lee is going to tell you stories and make you laugh, and then the other Rocket Boys are there, and then you have the technology of what's going on. We had the folks from Hubble down one year and talking about their telescope and how they had to fix their telescope when they put the lenses in backwards, sort of like that. But anyway, so we had a lot of different folks come in and be a part of this. Steve, you did a great service to this because you're the kid that collected his baseball cards and kept them in good order. I mean, you're that, because there's some things that you captured that won't be there any longer. You have some 52 Mickey Mantles. I mean, of that variety. I mean, you have some things that no one else has. And kudos to you as far as seeing that in your eye and saying, hey, someone needs to record this. So, the Rocket Boy Festival has been a tremendous thing for the city of Beckley, and the guys have been great to work with. We're just happy to be along for this particular ride.
I want to point out some of the particular photos and some of the interesting things in those pictures. Before I forget, though, I want to remind folks who are watching live today that at noon, if you're an aspiring writer, you want to be the next Homer Hickam, there's a Business of Books workshop happening at noon Eastern today, 9 a.m. Pacific, and we'll have 3 leading independent publishers who can tell you all about books. And at 1 o'clock this afternoon, there's a panel with the director and producer and cast members of the movie Mine 9, which is arguably the biggest movie that takes place in Appalachia and in and around the mining industry since the movie October Sky. So those sessions are still to come. There's a picture in the upper, where is it? No, I'm sorry. It's the middle. Well, there's a bunch of these of the guys. If you see a bunch of guys around Homer Hickam, chances are they are the actual other Rocket Boys. So I want to point them out. In the upper left, there's Homer, Scott Hill, and Roy Lee Cook. The photo right next to that as Odell Carroll, if you're familiar with the Rocket Boys books, and Billy Rose with the WV cap on, along with Roy Lee. And down in the lower right, Steve, you're talking to Red Carroll, who's a very pivotal character in the trilogy of books that Homer wrote. He's also the father of Odell Carroll, and Red was quite a character, Steve.
He sure was. One of my favorite memories of Red by the way, that we're standing up where the old tipple was, and he's explaining how that all worked and what his job was and all that. I did several interviews with him. I talk about how I didn't know how to use a video camera really, or I wasn't a filmmaker. I was reading the instructions for my new camera on the driving down to West Virginia with my daughter. And the next day I was sitting in Red Carroll's living room interviewing him. And that's the first scene in the film. So that was the best experience for me to, I got to the right guy first, because he used to give tours. Somebody would stop in the store and they would call him up and he'd drive down there and give people a tour of the town. That's who he became later in life for that town.
Isn't that great? There's a photo in the lower right there of Homer with a Virginia Tech student, and Homer, of course, went on to school at Virginia Tech before becoming a NASA engineer, and the Tech students would come in every year and assist with those rocket launches in Colwood and then in Beckley. And then, Scott, that photo of you, and you brushed kind of right past it, but that's you in the church there at the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine as part of the company town. Yes, there is a mine that you can tour, which is fascinating and amazing. If you've never been inside an actual coal mine, most people haven't, but there's an entire company store, and there's company houses, and there's this church where you do the essay contest. And the essay contest continues this year, even though it's virtually. So tell us a little bit about that and why that's an important component of the Rocket Boys story and the Rocket Boys Festival.
Well, the essay contest is something we kind of fell upon us, or just kind of dumb luck or whatever. We thought there'd be a good thing to engage students, middle school and high school students. There's two different divisions, 250 words or less on a relative subject. This year's subject is, how has the pandemic affected you in a positive way? Everybody knows kind of negative ways are out there, but in a positive way. That's going to be what we're going to ask middle schoolers and high schoolers, and they're going to submit their work to us, and we're going to offer prizes as autographed books. Those are small cash prize. And there was a chance to meet Homer and Roy Lee. We don't know if we can do that again, but that's what we have had in the past. The essay contest has been a great thing. We had over 1,000 different entries one year. And so that's been a great thing for the festival, for outreach to the school programs.
I can tell you that this year, even if you don't have the opportunity to meet Homer and Roy Lee and the Rocket Boys in person, that Homer has graciously offered to sign copies of his books for the essay winners. And Scott, how do folks, students that want to participate in the essay contest, how do they send those essays in to you?
All the information is on our website. It's the rocketboysfestival.com. It's on the homepage, and it gives you the email address where you'll be able to send them by email this year. First time ever for that. But that way you can send them in by email, and we'll do that as long. The deadline is December 31st.
We've got a question that's come in from viewer Dan Stanley. Hey, Dan, thanks for watching. Dan wants to know, do y'all have anything to do with the different schools during student rocket launches every year? That's a great question. Certainly we can't do them all, but Roy Lee, I know you've participated in, gosh, dozens, maybe hundreds of rocket launches in the last 20 years at schools all over the country. Homer has as well. Do you ever feel that you are part of this story that inspires kids all over the country, all over the world, and maybe at this point that story and that inspiration is bigger than you actual Rocket Boys yourselves?
I do sometimes believe that completely. I have been doing rocket launches in a great number of states, but I think the one that inspired me the most was one of my old football coaches had run into me in Colwood and said he wanted me to come to his school outside of Charleston. And he later contacted me that week and said, you need to buy 100 rockets and I'll repay you, but I cannot buy them myself. The school won't let me. So I showed up at the school. By the way, he gave me the bad directions, so I never found the school. And I showed up there with a carload of boxes of rockets. And the first thing I did was I pulled out my knife to open up the boxes, and it freaked out all the teachers. Of course, I wasn't supposed to have a knife, I guess. And then I realized that the people that were going to be launching these rockets, making the rockets and launching them, were first, second, third graders. I want to tell you that I got sick. And first of all, I'm not a teacher, so I don't know how to explain anything. And we were doing these rockets, and the kids were making a lot of mistakes. So I called over 4 or 5 of the teachers. I said, here's the deal. I don't think any of these rockets are going to fly. I want you 5 women to make me 5 rockets, because we'll fire them off tomorrow. Well, this day lasted for about 3 days. I thought I would never get through it. Went out on a farm with my old coach, and he had cattle that I hadn't been around since I was 12. I didn't know what I was doing. So we show up the next day in a real gloomy day. And we're out there, and all the townsfolk of that town were there, every one of them. And the first grader came over with his rocket. And I said a prayer. I'm not a religious man, but I think that day I really prayed hard. Do you know that we did not have a single failure that day? 100 rockets fired. And that is, believe me, if anyone's ever fired rockets, even been to our rocket boys contests, there's always some that don't work. 100 rockets went off that day. And I'll never forget this preacher that was standing near me, and he probably heard my prayers, my cuss words, everything, all my words. And he said, I want to invite you back to a camp meeting. And I said, would you explain camp meeting to me? And he told me it was a religious gathering. I said, look, I'm not going to press my luck. I got 100 rockets to fire today. I'm not coming to a camp meeting. so I'm telling you, my experience with launching rockets across the country has been a wonderful experience for me. And I sometimes think that there are 2 things that came out of that movie and book. One is that it inspired people to know that they can do anything that they could ever want to be. Obviously, the best message. The other thing is it's inspiring a lot of people to fire rockets.
Leslie Baker joins our meeting today. She is the executive director of the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine. Hey, Leslie, thanks for chiming in today. I know that, and you may have to unmute yourself so we can ask you some questions. And by the way, if you do have questions that you'd like to ask, you can chime in on Facebook Live or YouTube, and we're happy to ask Roy Lee and Scott and Steve and now Leslie any questions that you may have. When people come to the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine Complex, Leslie, and they come, I'm sure, from all over the country, probably all over the world, what do they want to know about the Rocket Boys story? What questions do they ask you about that, about coal mining, about your complex?
Well, what we have found out over the years is they don't know anything. They don't know anything about our culture. They come here. For so long, we've kind of felt like there was a stereotypical thought, but it's been a long time since the Beverly Hillbillies have been on different things. They truly come not knowing anything. And then when we tell them our story through the various means that we do, they are so amazed that what we did in this region of the country helped forge our nation and make our nation the country that it is today. They have no idea the role that coal played. And when we tell them that, they are really very appreciative, they're awestruck, and they just want to know more. So they come back, they find that just this visit to the exhibition coal mine has really inspired them to plan other visits to this area and to go deeper into the coal fields and to learn more about our culture, because they truly, that's what we found, they know very little. We have questions that I'll never forget. This one question, it was, it's so hard. Coal mining work is so hard. Why don't they just use electricity instead of coal?
And of course, for the folks that are watching that may not know the answer is?
Well, that's where you get electricity, from coal. So
That's
it's
right.
the other way around. And they don't realize the connection. And there's a lot of questions of, they're just very, very intrigued. And what we present here at the exhibition Coal Mine is coal mining. Well, we do try to give them an idea of what modern mining is like, but it is such on a grander scale than what it was in the Coalwood days and in the days of what our interpretation here at the exhibition Coal Mine was. But it was those days that were really pulling the coal out of these mountains, that were providing the coal and the coke for the steel that was building the roads and the cars and the tanks to win our wars, and the skyscrapers to build our big cities. And that's what they just don't understand and are so appreciative about. But we tell that complete story. We have a small mine museum here that starts it, and we are considered the trailhead of the Coal Heritage Trail and of the Coal Heritage region. Everybody's encouraged, if you're interested and to find out more, to come here. And then we have all the information to go to all the other places like Coalwood, like Whipple, Thurman, the places that they have available to see and interpret over, and the national park. So we start them off, and they just thirst for more knowledge and spend much more time here in Southern West Virginia.
Leslie Baker is the executive director of the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine, and we've shown lots of photos of your facility, maybe some before you chimed in, and we talked about how Beckley is a great launching place to go to all these other places, because you've got interstate highways, you've got an Amtrak station, you've got an airport, you've got lots of hotels, lots of restaurants that some of these remote towns like Coalwood don't have. But in many of those photos, you saw hundreds and hundreds of people. And we did show some photos from underground, but can you sort of paint a picture of your facility? Because it really is, as Scott said, it's like the Disney version of what a coal mining town was at a certain point in time.
Well, we do have it all here. Like I said, you come in, you buy your ticket. We have all types of dioramas. We have stuff that was that were created. We have things that have been donated. Then you go up to the small museum on the second floor, and we present all different types of artifacts that the miners used, the helmets, their boots, the self-respirators, the self-rescuers, the respirators, and the coal buckets. The dinner buckets are probably the most fascinating thing on the second floor. And I don't know that people understand, when you go underground, you can't just take a regular lunch. You have to take something a lunch bucket. So these buckets were a special. They were multi-chambered. One of them, you put your lunch in, another one you put your water in, and then there was another pan to put your dessert or something else. And people are just absolutely fascinated by the different shapes and the sizes of the lunch buckets. And then we go underground is the main focal point of the trip. And our tours are always guided by veteran coal miners, which really make the time underground so very, very authentic, because they tell their story, what it was like when they worked, what mine they worked in, how many years they worked in it. It's about 1,500 feet into the mountainside. We have 4 stops. We have all different kinds of modern equipment, older equipment. They tell the stories everywhere from what it's like to light a carbide light to why the canaries were used underground. And then when they come, that was the first part for many, many years. And then in the development of the exhibition Coal Mine, so many people wondered, okay, so now we've seen what it's like underground. What was daily life for the coal miners like? Where did they live? Where did their children go to school? What was above ground life like? So back in the 90s, the coal camp was created. We have all these buildings came from coal camps. They were used for what we used them for here on site, and they were taken down piece by piece, relocated, put together like big jigsaw puzzles. So we have the Helen School. It's a 2-room school that was in the coal camp of Helen here in Raleigh County. We have the superintendent's house that came from right here in Sprague, West Virginia. It was part of the New River Coal. We have the miners' shanty that came from Rodell, and it's probably my favorite. It's like 1 room, and miners that were single or lived too far away from home, they stayed in those little tiny complexes. And then we have the miners' house, and it came from Raleigh County as well. And we had the Pemberton Coal Camp Church that came from Pemberton here in Raleigh County as well. So it really gives you, when you tour those houses, and we have docents in each of the houses, and they are ladies and gentlemen that actually grew up in coal camps. so they can give an authentic voice to what it was like to live in a coal camp. And it usually takes about, depending on how curious you are, at least 2 to 3 hours here to do everything properly, to see, to talk, to really get the feel of what it's like. And then inevitably, people don't just leave. They go downstairs, they get the maps to go deeper into the coal fields, and they want to learn more. And we have just one little area where we sell coal-related books, and we sell Homer's books, we sell other books, and people just, they love those books. They buy those books in great volumes just so they can learn more about our experience here.
Scott, that part of Southern West Virginia that includes the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine is just, a treasure trove for people who are outdoor enthusiasts as well. You've got, matter of fact, you live right at the foot of a ski resort. In the wintertime, there's whitewater rafting. In the summertime, rock climbing, mountain biking, and also a huge and beautiful outdoor theater that you are the executive director of, Theater West Virginia, where you've done Rocket Boys the musical. So tell our viewers a little bit about Theater West Virginia.
Well, thank you. For the last 59 years now, or 60 years now, we have had an outdoor drama, starting with Honey in the Rock, the story of the formation of West Virginia. Then Billy Ed Wheeler's Hatfields and McCoys, and the most recent thing we've added is one of the more recent things we've added is Rocket Boys the musical. As Homer says, dancing coal miners. How can you go wrong with that? So we added that, and it was very well received. And we've been showing that along with the newest production we have is Paradise Park, another West Virginia story. So basically, we are an outdoor amphitheater. We have 1,200 seats. We're in the middle of a national park. And it's a great venue. During the summer, we come out and we have about 45 shows each summer, and we invite everyone to come and be a part of Southern West Virginia. You can be out with the wildlife and seeing a great stage show on our stage.
Now, we're all very
Grand
bullish about West Virginia. I'm a native West Virginian. Roy Lee is as well. But I want to ask Steve Date, as a guy who has no personal family connection to West Virginia, what is it about that area around Coalwood and Beckley and Southern West Virginia that made it so special to you that you wanted to do that documentary and that you came back? Minnesota is not next door. You hopped on a bus with a bunch of teachers and students and made that pilgrimage for many years. So what is it about West Virginia that touched your heart?
I think it was just the fact that here was a place that is part of our country that I had never spent any time in, and it was in many, there are similarities wherever you go, especially in the United States. There's chain this and chain that to go to, but where you really feel like you are living in a place that people live differently than you do. And there are several reasons for that. One was the fact that it was a company town, which I knew really nothing about. And we have company towns here too. I mean, most people work at one company, but the fact of the way it was back in the 50s and earlier into the 60s was not unique, but so unusual for me. And that life, because of that, the fact, all the things that Roy talked about all the things they had and the way they took care of the people, was such a good story. I just think it was such a story that most people I know here don't really think about or know anything about. So I wanted to tell that story. And there were some people around yet from those days that had memories, and I could see that they were aging, and 15 years later, a lot of them aren't with us anymore. So unsurprisingly, because of the age they were at then. Not only that, but I think another reason is the geography of the area makes it unique. There's never going to be, I hate to say this, I don't think any industry in Coalwood itself. It's too hard to get to. It's deteriorating, and they can't rebuild because of government regulations, because of the flooding of the creek. So it's a place that had a place in time, and that time is gone. The people that live there, I'm sure they love it. I still know some of them, but it's a place that at a moment in time was a big deal. And I think everybody agrees that if you go there now, it's not what it was. So I wanted to preserve the memories of the people. And also, I'm glad I got there. Part of another reason that as I started shooting, I'm interested in historic preservation in general. And I had hoped to do something to help save some of those buildings, because at that time it wasn't for sure that they were all going to be torn down. And I had hoped to help, and Homer talks about it in my film, about he hoped that this film would help do that too. Well, it didn't work out, but it was an attempt, and at least we have them preserved on video and in photos, and people talking about the memories of what happened there.
We'll definitely have to connect you and Leslie Baker with the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine. It would be great to make the Welcome to Coalwood documentary DVDs available.
Actually, I failed to mention, I was gonna work this in, but I'm not sure if they have any copies left, but the exhibition mine has copies, Tamarack has copies, and I think there are a few at the Bramwell station also. So other than stevedate.com, there are a couple of other places, if you're in West Virginia, that you can get it.
Fantastic. Here's a question that's come in from a viewer from Kirk. And I guess we could start with you on this one, Scott. Can you recommend how children and families can get into model rocketry these days? Where do they find the appropriate rockets? Now, when we've done this non-virtually, you do a big rocket launch at the Rocket Boys Festival there at the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine. Where do you find the rockets?
Well, there's, the folks at Estes, I mean, who have probably should be sending Homer and Roy Lee money on a regular basis. Because, I mean, without Rocket Boys, the Estes company would not be as profitable as it is right now. We just shot off $200 worth of Rocket Boy rockets, or Estes rockets 2 days ago. So I mean, you're doing this multiple times across the area. They are publications, and there are groups that you can find that will help you. But the SD rocket is pretty simple, as long as you have an adult with you and you can put it together and launch a small one first. If you want to launch the ones that Roy Lee launched with Homer, you're going to jail, okay? Because they're not, I mean, it's simple as that. The big boys that they were shooting off, you can't do anymore, okay? So the little guys as Estes, you can find at the Hobby Lobbies and the craft stores and the other, your local hobby shops throughout the country. The Estes rockets are probably the best way to go.
Roy Lee, Scott makes a good point, and Homer touched on it in one of the panels yesterday, is that the rockets that you guys made, and very famously in the book and the movie, Homer's mom Elsie said, well, boys, just don't blow yourselves up. Y'all are lucky that you made it out of there with all your fingers and toes back in the day.
There's no question about it. I don't know how we did it. We had something or somebody watching over us, because they were highly explosive, very volatile, the fuel, and it's just a miracle that we didn't lose at least Jimmy Carroll.
And the lucky that Odell is still with us.
Right.
Leslie, you work in the tourism field in West Virginia, and lots of folks lay claim to lots of beautiful places and lots of unique stories. But I wonder, from your vantage point, as somebody who now has been heavily involved in the Rocket Boys story for the last decade or so, and have hosted that festival, what do you think that story, the Rocket Boys story, means to your part of the world?
Well, we see here two distinct types of people. We see people that, like I said earlier when I was talking, that don't know anything at all about our culture and are so very interested in it after we expose them to it. Then we have the local people who have always had somebody in their family that was in the mines. We have grandpa, brother, somebody was in the mines. But it's just life. You don't think about it until you hear a story like Coalwood, how proud we all were of the movie October Sky. It just, those kind of stories, Homer telling his stories and being published all over the world, give us such pride in ourselves, because you don't think about it until somebody pats you on the back, or it's acknowledged by a greater group of people that yes, our culture is pretty special. Our culture is different. Just like the other gentleman said, our way of life in some ways has gone away. Those memories that we have are gone, and they're never coming back. We have to remember them, though. It was such an important era in this country's history. But that's what people get from it. It's like this, what you, Scott said earlier, it's a good story. It is a good story. It will continue to resonate with people for centuries because it is part of the myth and mythology and true life of who we are and what we've done here in this country. We're such a unique kind of homogenized group of people. There is not a whole lot of diversity here, where most everybody in Southern West Virginia is white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. We're almost all Scotch-Irish, and we don't have a lot of diversity. And but we came here, our ancestors came here for a reason. And we stayed in these mountains. We've continued to be here, and we'll be here regardless of what industry is here. We'll figure out something. Tourism is one of our big things right now that we're really pushing, because we are within a day's drive of just about everybody in the Eastern United States. We do have unique history. People love cultural tourism, and we do have some of the most beautiful vistas and drives and overlooks that you can see anywhere in this country. So that's kind of why the story is so important. It's a good story, and we can not only tell the story, but we can show what, this is where this story happened. This is what it's like.
You know, that book has been translated into a couple of dozen languages now, and the movie is shown, you know, all over the world, and still you see it on TV all the time. I personally have met people who have come to the festival from the Philippines, from Japan, that just wanted to see it. I wonder some of the unique places, Leslie, that people have come up to you and said, I'm here for this and I'm from there. Where are they from?
Well, we have to, because we do some grants for the festival, we have to closely track that and document it. We've had people from, that we know of, 8 different countries. Now that's, you know, we don't talk to every individual, but when they're obviously, or Homer talks to every one of them, I believe. But so we find out we've had people from almost all 50 states.
Wow. We've
had people that came every year that we had the festival, every year, wouldn't miss it, from wherever they lived in the country. And so it was something that was really a wonderful time to do, and a wonderful thing to have. And Homer is a true rock star. He's such a gentleman, and his books really, I heard you say, it was either yesterday or the day before, that 8th graders used to, and when I was an 8th grader, what we read was To Kill a Mockingbird. And kind of to explain, that opened the world of the South to me. I was living in Massachusetts at the time, and that story told of their culture and of a period in time and what life was like in that small town in the South. So that's the way the Rocket Boys October Sky does to all those 8th graders out there now. They get to learn about a different time in a different part of the country that is so unfamiliar to them, but they'll carry it with them forever.
It's an incredible story, and I appreciate all of you joining us to talk about it today on the virtual Rocket Boys Festival. Steve Date's documentary, Welcome to Coalwood, available at stevedate.com and also at the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine Company store if you happen to be traveling through. Scott Hill, you do have copies. Scott Hill
we have a few copies.
The executive director of Theater West Virginia, and also the Rocket Boys Festival. Leslie Baker, the executive director of the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine and Museum. Thank you all for joining us today. And a quick reminder that Homer Hickham's books are available at homerhickam.com/bookshop. And if you can't make it to meet him in person at the Rocket Boys Festival this year, there is a way for you to pick up autographed copies of his book. Our next session at noon Eastern today is The Business of Books. If you're an aspiring author and you'd like to find out more about the publishing industry, be sure you're here for that at 1 o'clock this afternoon Eastern time. The producer, director, and cast reunion from Mine 9. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today for the virtual Rocket Boys Festival. I'm Burke Allen. So long.